Hello, my cogs and gears. This is IndigoNyx, and welcome to another fireside chat. Today, we're going to be going ahead and discussing a little something called gatekeeping. I'm going to go over a couple different examples of it, and then we'll go ahead and conclude our little discussion here. So, gatekeeping is really kind of a form of, in my opinion, a form of discrimination. Where essentially the idea is that you have this almost impossible standard that is almost always shifting and changing, that people place on others based on sometimes some pretty ridiculous minor stuff. It really kind of comes from a place of either bitterness or entitlement, with all due respect. Actually, no due respect. We're not being respectful here. People who gatekeep are kind of assholes. And we'll get into why and the difference between calling out bad behavior and gatekeeping. So, when it comes to gatekeeping within POC communities, I don't have as much experience because I am very, 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 very white. But I have had some opportunity to observe. My most direct interaction with gatekeeping within a POC community is in the case of the singer Halsey. Halsey is a white passing individual who has an African American father. I believe actually specifically Haitian American, not actually black, or not actually African American, but black. Halsey throughout their career has worn wigs instead of actually letting out their real hair. But in a recent turn of events, she took her wig off and started to grow out her natural hair. A lot of people were calling her out as being culturally appropriative. Now, my understanding of cultural appropriation is that when it comes to black hairstyles, that individuals who have that kind of hair need to have their hair in those hairstyles because that is that is what is most natural and less damaging to their hair. It's also part of their cultural heritage, of course, but it's also kind of out of a functionality. It needs to be done. The fact that, white women can wear their hair like that, but black women can't without being discriminated against, that's the hypocrisy, and that's where the drive to call out white women wearing it as cultural appropriation comes from. Though my understanding was, if Halsey is a white passing but essentially black individual, if her hair is of that variety, then she might need to wear her hair like that, and forcing her to continue to wear wigs is damaging to her hair's health. But when I mentioned that, somebody said, well, it doesn't matter, she's not black enough. There is that issue within the black community of colorism, the idea that if you aren't black enough, you aren't black, and you don't get to talk about how you get discriminated against despite the fact that you get discriminated against. The same thing can go for individuals who don't act black enough. I've seen this issue before. If you don't have this certain perceived behavior, that you could be ostracized from the community as not being black enough. This is a form of gatekeeping I have observed and have been told about, but it is not something that I have experienced. So there's a certain level of, I would say, cultural dissidence on this one. So if you are an individual who is of a POC community and wants to discuss any forms of gatekeeping you may have experienced within your community, definitely feel free to comment below. And no, I'm not talking about white individuals who didn't get to wear their cornrows. Like, no, we just talked about that. That's cultural appropriation. Stop. To a point. If you're just someone who's aware that, like, yeah, I wear in cornrows and this is an African American thing, but I do not discriminate against individuals, and it's like, I may not be the right to judge on that one, but like I said, I don't have the right to judge on that one. But if you're an individual who's all like, oh my goodness, ghetto, but then like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna wear dreads, then you an asshole who culturally appropriates because you a hypocrite. That's also kind of where like a lot of gatekeeping comes from, the place of hypocrisy. You can almost argue that. And then the next one I have personally experienced multiple times is gatekeeping within the mental and physical disability communities. I have 4 official diagnoses of mental health disorders, as well as one unofficial physical disability. Was officially diagnosed with migraines, but I believe that my migraines come from chronic fatigue syndrome. I don't have the ability to actually get it diagnosed, and getting chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosed is extremely difficult. But my experiences mostly comes from the mental health. I've had a lot of people tell me like my mental health issues and where they come from, especially with the post-traumatic stress disorder that I experience, is not good enough. And they want to kind of play this competition game with me. And my attitude is more along the lines of, well, you can drown in 5 feet of water or you can drown in 5 inches. It doesn't really matter. If you want to play that competition game, I think the Romanian child sex slave who has cancer is going to have us all beat there, honey. And that being said, I've also experienced gatekeeping in a form of hypocrisy. Again, like I said before, a lot of gatekeeping is kind of hypocritical, in a way. I had a individual who was someone I thought was my friend, who appeared to be an ally, who also experienced mental health disorders, or stated they experienced mental health disorders. And I had one point had to ask them to stop doing something because they had, up to this point, kind of been very dismissive of my health issues. Very dismissive, and very dismissive of me. And I had just, as politely as I could, just stated, like, please stop doing that. And they got very kind of rude with me, and they also brought something up about how they were always busy and da-da-da-da, and I had offered to help them and be like, well, let me help you, and they got even more disrespectful towards me. Later they had over a variety of different events that had happened, they later had kind of cornered me with a few other people, and started to accuse me of a lot of either exaggerated or one or two things that were completely made up. But it really just kind of boiled down to, I'm allowed to be rude and disrespectful and use my mental illness as a crutch, but if you even dare think about asking for people to be respectful of your mental health space and your disabilities, then you are the villain, and I'm truly always the victim kind of attitude. And yeah, that I consider that a form of gatekeeping, because that's really, at the end of the day, you're basically saying that my mental health disorder is not as important as yours, and that I'm not good enough. And that was very damaging. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was very suicidal with this group of people, and very depressed, and I was self-harming aggressively during this time because of how they were treating me. And the fact that they would even go that far of saying, like, you're the bad guy, you're the bad person, and that your mental health issues aren't good enough compared to mine, when I'm sitting here figuring out how many pills it's going to take to kill myself because I'm angry and I don't want to live in this world anymore because of how I'm being treated, and kind of suffering in silence because I don't want to talk about it, because I don't want you people accusing me of doing, of trying to be manipulative, because you're already accusing me of being a villain for things that you've just exaggerated or made up. God knows I can't give you even more fuel to that fire. You know, it was very hurtful and very damaging, and it could put me in a very bad place that I was, you know, in as a teenager, when people as a teenager were verbally abusing me and treating me like crap. And it kind of took me back to that headspace. So that's how damaging gatekeeping can be in that regard. And, you know, just to move on to the next form of gatekeeping that I've seen that I know I can talk on with confidence is the LGBTQ. Now, I'm a bisexual, gender fluid individual. I have seen this gatekeeping. While I have not experienced it directly, I have experienced, because people don't start arguments with me for reasons. I have a tendency to walk into a room and get into the middle of an argument, and try to finish the argument. But generally, people don't walk up to me and hear, oh, I'm bisexual, gender fluid, and go, oh my goodness, I'm going to start a fight with this person. Like, no, I think they can see the horns on my head going, oh, please, start this fight. Start this fight with me. You will lose. Or I will goddamn make sure I try everything to bring you the fuck down. It will be scorched earth. But I've seen this kind of discrimination. I've seen a lot of gay men be very discriminatory towards lesbian women. I've seen both gay men and lesbian women be discriminatory towards bisexual people. I've seen all three of those be discriminatory towards transgender people. I've seen within the transgender community this splitting of hairs when it comes to, oh, you gotta experience gender dysphoria, or you have to experience euphoria, or you must fit into these gender stereotypes in order for us to consider you valid. When in reality, like, just to speak on that, one, everybody's mental health journey is going to be different. Gender dysphoria is a form of mental health. It is not the end-all be-all of being trans. It is merely something that happens if you are trans, can happen if you are trans. However, if someone is just aware of who they are and just goes, I'm a boy. Some people are just born with that level of confidence. And some people are not. And some people have to learn it. And some people learn it, and over time they've accepted it and they stop getting gender dysphoria. It happens. To automatically assume that everyone must have the same psychological profile to be underneath something is ridiculous and a complete lack of understanding of psychology, because no two people experience something the same way. You know, no two people experience depression the same way. You know, no two people experience bipolar disorder the same way, or schizophrenia the same way. That's why psychology is such a complicated and vast field. When you're dealing with the psychology of a transgender person, that's still a relatively unexplored field of study. And while transgender people have been around for, since the beginning of human history, it's still something that we don't entirely understand as modern people with science. While science has proven transgender people are a legit thing, it's still a case of, like, we know it's a thing, we just don't know why. Same way yawning, it's kind of like yawning. We know it's a thing, we just don't know why. So, and then also the whole idea that you gotta fit into a gender stereotype is completely contradictory to feminist ideology, or the idea that, oh, you must be this masculine to be considered a male, or you must be this feminine to be considered a woman. And it's just like, didn't we just, burn a shit ton of bras just to prove this wrong? Like, didn't we start talking about toxic masculinity just to prove this wrong? Like, shouldn't we all, like, you know, stop and realize that we're being very contradictory of things, and that, you know, automatically saying that you have to be fully transitioned or you have to be this masculine to ride this trans ride, it automatically assumes that you were always cisgender from the beginning as a transgender person, when the whole point of being transgender is, I was always transgender, I just realized it later, or I didn't realize it later, or I came out at a certain time. Yeah, keep that one in mind. Just to circle back about gender stereotypes, you know, that's something I would throw at TERFs, and TERFs is a can of worm I'm going to open up later. TERFs, just to let you know, is a transgender exclusionary radical feminist. It's not a slur, it is an abbreviation of what exactly you are. You just don't like being called out for things that you say. And guess what? This is a channel that calls out people for the things that they say. We will have a whole video dedicated to you, you special snowflakes. You are one of the few people I will call snowflakes. The rest of y'all have some justifications. Some. But sometimes I will come at you with the sandal upside the head going, get your head straight. And just to let everybody know, that is Southern. Because I have Southern ancestry. So, and then of course, you know, we'll be moving past that because we cannot forget them, because they oftentimes get forgotten, but we all, just people love crapping on them so much for some goddamn reason, is asexual people. I will talk about this for a minute. Being a part of the LGBTQ means that your gender does not fit within the cisgender ideology that has been placed upon us, and that your sexuality does not fit within the heteronormative umbrella that has been placed upon us. So yes, being asexual fits into the goddamn LGBTQA. A is for asexual, not for goddamn fucking ally. Are you someone who fits into the heteronormative umbrella, but wants to help out gay people? Great, but you're not a part of the LGBTQA. You ain't gay, you ain't lesbian, you ain't trans, and you sure as hell ain't asexual. Okay? So if you're asexual, or demisexual, or demi-romantic, or aromantic, and asexual, or asexual, heterosexual, or asexual, heteromantic, or aromantic, heterosexual, where you only like the sex but you don't form romantic bonds, y'all belong here. Because you don't fit into the heteronormative umbrella. And that's what the LGBTQ was made for. So I don't want to hear none of that. If asexual people can be discriminated against by heterosexual people, heterosexual cisgender individuals, for being asexual or aromantic or any variation thereof, if there is forms of corrective rape for asexual people or aromantic people, I think they get to stay. Okay? I don't want to hear none of this. So, just to wrap up what I'm saying here, gatekeeping is harmful because it is mentally damaging. It can hurt people. It can put them in a mental place that they shouldn't be in. It can make them question things. It is a form of gaslighting. It is a form of manipulation. It is hypocritical. You are constantly changing the goalposts. There is no set standard that you're going to make and no set standard you're going to keep. I have seen someone who was questioning their gender, who may have been gender fluid, who may have been a transgender woman, who couldn't and didn't want to explore it because they were scared of being called a trans trender or whatever the fuck it's called, or basically being called a fake. That's what it is. There's no other term for it. No cutesy little name. You're calling someone who's trans a fake. This person didn't want to explore this because y'all they were scared of being called a fake because of y'all. So that means so many trans people who are now coming into this world thinking that maybe they are trans and they're not cis, aren't going to explore that, are going to keep themselves in that little box because of people like you. Because they're scared of people like you. You, another transgender person, are damaging the transgender community. You're not helping, you're a harm. And to be perfectly honest, if someone who is exploring their sexuality and or gender realizes they aren't that gender or sexuality, and they have a newfound appreciation for it, then let them. No one who's gonna be questioning their gender and go, I'm not really sure I'm actually the gender that I'm trying to identify as, is going to go so far as to switch over all the way. Now, there's some weird people, with some weird fetishes out there, and we can't speak on them. But anybody who straight up calls themselves trans, or wants to see if maybe are questioning their gender, who may be like, I'm not really cisgender, or whatever, let them. They might be questioning it. There may be a case there isn't a label for what they have yet, or they haven't explored that label. I mean, the best thing to do is be like, here's the history, here's the reference material, here's a big old book of everything you'll need to know about sexuality and gender. Have fun. And if they go, no, I explored it. Occasionally I like to wear women's dresses, or to wear dresses and be more feminine, but I'm a dude. You can, and as long as they're just like, and I have no problem with trans people, and I fully appreciate and understand what it's like to be a trans person now, and I totally support your cause, and we're great, and you can be like, great, that's perfect. All you've done now is create a ally who's been able to walk a mile in your shoes, who has now that newfound appreciation. Don't unclench the butt cheeks a little. Unclench them. And I get it. It comes from a place of paranoia, because we still live in a world that's very discriminatory towards trans people. I understand. But it's still coming from the same concept of, like, where the TERFs have this attitude where trans women are actually men trying to invade women's spaces to rape them kind of attitude. You're kind of coming up with this idea that people coming in who want to be trans are coming in to attack you. There's a reason behind it, but there's no justification for it. Generally, if you're gonna want to explore the concept of, like, when is it okay to call someone out within your minority, it's when they are behaving badly and trying to use the being in that minority as a justification. That would be the time to do so. That'd be, I think, the only time. Outside of that, gatekeeping is manipulation, it is damaging, it is not helping anyone, it is a form of entitlement and then bitterness, and it's hurting others. Stop. So I'm going to wrap it up now. I don't have much time left here. Please check out my Patreon, help donate. I'm kind of running low on funds, so that'd be great. If you want to donate one time, check out my Ko-Fi. Also check out my Facebook, my Tumblr, my DeviantArt, my Twitter. I'm all on those. Please subscribe. Subscribing is free. Helping spread the channel around. The more the merrier, better and better. Don't be an asshole in the comments. If you want to talk about your experiences with gaslighting, that's great. But again, don't be an asshole. We don't like assholes here. Alright, you have a good rest of your night, and thank you for listening.